Hello everybody and welcome back. In this episode of Wood Chips and Black Steel, we're going to replace the plastic pad on this Browning Citori 20 gauge shotgun with a new rubber pad from Pachmayr. Now this Browning belongs to one of our regular customers and shooters back at Roadies. Last summer he was up at the skeet range shooting a couple rounds of skeet with us, and he accidentally dropped the gun and dropped it down on the toe. And when he did, he chipped off a small piece of the plastic butt pad as well as chipping off a piece of the wood. Now we searched for a good half an hour. We found the little piece of black plastic, but no matter how long we looked, we couldn't find the wood. So my uncle ended up just gluing a temporary piece of walnut on there, just in order for Mark to get through the shooting season, which he did. It was fine temporarily. When the season ended, Mark gave me the gun and he asked me if I would install this rubber pad, which I'm going to do. Now there are a couple concerns doing this install. The first concern is the typical high gloss finish that Browning puts on their guns. A lot of people feel that's attractive, but it's a very hard, brittle finish, and it has a tendency when you cut it to chip. So I'm going to have to be really, really careful when I'm cutting this extra piece of wood off, that I don't chip that finish, so that when I get a nice seam between the butt pad and the wood. Now another concern is maintaining the pitch angle when I cut this thing off. Now one of the reasons this is going to be a problem is when they cut the butt at the factory, they gave it a slight curve, and the pad that I'm installing is flat. It has a flat edge. So I have to maintain that pitch angle, and in order to do that I have to figure out, sort of intersect those angles and get close to that pitch angle. Now that pitch angle comes from the sight plane of the gunstock. In order to determine pitch angle, you need to know what that sight plane is. Now on a shotgun it's not all that difficult to determine, because what we'll do is we'll just lay the shotgun down on the rib, because the rib on an over and under shotgun is the sight plane, and then taking a protractor, coming up against the pad, we then sort of get a sense of where it is. Now I've got the pad on here right now. When I do the actual measurement, I'll do it without the pad, and then sort of, like I said, extrapolate and intersect that angle so that it's close. And then taking this, once we've got that figured out, I'll come over here, whatever the thickness of the pad is, and then I'll scribe a line that sort of gives me a good sense of where that angle is. Pitch angle often is determined in a custom build by the shooter themselves. So larger people, that pitch angle is going to vary compared to somebody that may be, say, a little bit smaller. Now what that pitch angle typically does is, by doing this, by changing that pitch angle, it also changes the line of sight, or the plane of sight. You can take pitch away by cutting the angle more this way. It allows that gun to sort of come up and plane out differently than if you left it pitching this way, which would then bring that gun or muzzle up a little bit. There is a long argued debate if pitch makes a difference in improving a shooter's ability to hit target or not. James Howe, in his seminal work, The Modern Gunsmith, published in 1934, writes this of pitch angle. When a stock has no pitch, it often causes the user of the gun to shoot high. In contradiction, a stock which has too much pitch, we have the opposite extreme, which causes the gun to undershoot. But Clyde Baker writes in his book, Modern Gunsmithing, published in 1933, I cannot concur in this belief. I see no reason why the angle of departure would be altered the least bit, regardless of how the butt might be shaped. When a man specifies the amount of pitch he wants on a stock, I make it as he wants. When he leaves it up to me to fit him, I usually follow my own rules. So that's the goal. That's today's episode. We're going to cut this. I'm going to take you through the process, show you how I go through it, how I work not to chip this finish, and then installing the new butt pad. The new butt pad is actually much larger than is the original wood. So we're going to have to get this all mounted, and we're going to have to re-drill the holes. We'll probably end up having to plug some of those holes, re-drilling the holes, and then milling this away or sanding this away until we get it so that this profile matches as closely as we can the existing profile of that gun stock. So this is time consuming. It can be tedious. You need to really take your time doing the work. It's probably not something your typical YouTube gunsmith is going to just jump in and do. You need to have some experience. You should have some understanding of the process before you start getting in there with your table saw and start lopping off the end of this gun. So come on down to the shop and we'll get this whole thing started. After several attempts at calculating the pitch cut angle, I took the coward's way out. I grabbed a Ruger over-under and compared the two guns. Both were nearly identical for drop at the comb and heel, so I took an angle measurement from the Ruger and then replicated it onto the Browning. In the trade, we call that congeneering. I mentioned that bright, crispy finish. Well, I scribed the cut line with a sharp X-Acto knife down through the finish to the wood. The intent is that when I do the actual cut, any chipping will end at the scribe line. Alright, so once again I'm going to take the coward's way out. I am so concerned about chipping this finish that I decided I wasn't going to try and cut it with a saw, either by hand or on the table saw. I mounted this thing up in the mill, and I did some tests, and approaching the wood from the right direction or the right cutter rotation, it's a nice clean cut. So the fact that it is such a clean cut, in addition to the fact that I scribed it, I think I'm going to be good. The only downside to this is it's going to be really time consuming because I have to slowly mill material away. So what I did, I set it up on my angle plate. First thing I did was tape off the finish because I don't want to mar up the finish. And then I've clamped it in place, and I'll take a series of small cuts until I've got this thing right down to that scribe line. So I used the bubble level and got this thing so that it's nice and level this way, which ensures that the pad will be as square across the center line of the stock as the original one was. And then I had to sort of guess a little bit at the level this way, but when I get close, it's going to become real obvious whether or not I'm milling that scribe line or not, and I can make any adjustments from there. So let's go ahead and let's do this.